My name's Maia Osborn and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Southern Cross University. You may have noticed that I've changed the title of my presentation for today, and that was really because I wanted the key takeaway message to be around nurturing resilience rather than focusing on those feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. So I will be talking about nurturing resilience in times of unprecedented uncertainty and really sharing stories of holistic environmental education in primary schools from my own PhD research. So I'm sorry that you can't see my face while I'm giving this presentation. I wanted to just introduce myself there and say Jingi Walla, which means g'day in our local Bunjalung language. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and the Arakwal traditional owners of the Bunjalung Nation where I'm presenting from today. I recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I really, really mean that. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures, ways of knowing and being should underpin our teaching and learning efforts, because for Aboriginal peoples, country is much more than a place. Rock, tree, river, hill, animal, human, all were formed of the same substance. Country is loved, needed and cared for, and country loves, needs and cares for her peoples in return. Country is family, culture, identity. Country is self. And this understanding of our interconnectedness is so important as it fosters both accountability and resilience in these uncertain times. So today I wanted to share obviously my PhD research and some useful findings during these sort of crazy times we find ourselves in. And I purposefully included this roadmap in a different language because I think unfortunately research can sometimes feel not particularly relevant or relatable or user-friendly for teachers in the classroom. And that was a real motivation of mine to, I'm dedicating so much of my time to this PhD. I really wanted to make sure that it was relevant for teachers and educators and community members. So today I'll be sharing why I'm here, the background to my research, what I have learned from the teachers, well, some of what I've learned. There is so much more that I would love to share. And some practical suggestions during these crazy COVID-19 restrictions. So my passion for environmental education was inspired by a simple and sustainable childhood spent on 500 acres of bushland west of Byron Bay. But despite these incredible childhood experiences, and my passions, as an early career teacher, I felt ill-prepared to embrace environmental education confidently in the classroom. And I was really determined to learn more about how to support children to navigate these uncertain and challenging times. And I think we can all agree that these are such uncertain and challenging times. If we just think about the last 6 months dealing with drought, bushfires, the repercussions of bushfires even felt in the big cities with the smoke, and then flooding, and now the coronavirus. I hope you will all agree that there is little doubt about the urgent need to nurture children's resilience and also our own in these crazy times. Research shows that direct experience with future and unknown effects of climate change can cause phobic behaviour, panic, nightmares and anxiety in children. And there's, I think, a real growing awareness around what they're starting to call eco-anxiety, particularly in children. And I think the global strikes for climate really helped to show us that this is something that children are really thinking about and are concerned about. So my PhD research sought to listen to environmentally conscious teachers' stories, wisdom, understandings and experiences, and draw upon these to inform environmental education theory and practice. Because how better to learn about education and teaching and learning than to learn from teachers who have been doing this for a very long time. So I hopped in my car and I travelled up and down the east coast of Australia. I conducted multiple interviews. I observed with teachers for a week at a time with each teacher. I took copious amounts of field notes. The teachers kept journals. I kept a researcher journal. And I walked away with probably about 250,000 words worth of stories and insights around their environmental education philosophies, pedagogies and practices. And this approach really enabled me to develop a theoretical assemblage grounded in the reality of schools. I would absolutely love to spend half an hour talking you through this, and I think it really does need more time than this 15-minute time slot allows. But I just did want to signpost that I am in the process of developing some workshops around my PhD research. So if you are interested in what I've been talking about today, or teachers' environmental philosophies and community partnerships, because they were two other key focal points for my research, then please share your details with me and we can keep in touch. What I really wanted to share with you today was something that would be helpful for you, as teachers, either if you're still in schools, but probably mostly, as a lot of you are, going online, and parents at home that are navigating their own work commitments while homeschooling their children. So I wanted to look through some of the pedagogical approaches that the teachers in my study employed to support their holistic environmental education provision, and all of these pedagogies in one way or another helped children to be really engaged in their learning and develop resilience. So we'll be looking at lived experiences, place-responsive environmental education, experiential pedagogies, agency and participation, stories and storytelling, inquiry-based learning and arts-based environmental education. And I've just tried to give one or two examples for each of these to show what this might look like either in the classroom or at home. So we start with lived experiences, and this really involves connecting the learning to children's prior knowledge, prior experiences and prior understandings to their everyday lives. And this is something that I think as teachers we really know and understand the importance of, but I think perhaps sometimes in the busyness and the craziness of it all, that this is something that might not be achieved as much as we would hope. And it really involves eliciting and embracing children's own beliefs, their preferences, ideas, values, feelings and perspectives. And I think during these times, and particularly if you have your kids at home, I think it's a really beautiful time, hopefully, for us to be able to slow down and really listen and share with children. Just some of the ways that the teachers in my study achieved this linking with the children's lived experiences was using personal experiences as the inspiration for their writing, for their art, their drama, maths, songwriting, asking children explicitly what they want to learn about, where they want to explore, what they want to do that day, exploring everyday life choices and considering how to make positive changes. So for example, through conducting waste or water audits. And I think, this idea of if we are at home, really taking the time to observe, learn about and reflect upon tangible happenings. So sunrises, sunsets, the moon, the stars, tides, the temperature, wind direction. Place-responsive environmental education is probably the central approach that was most heavily featured in all the teachers' practices that I visited. And this involves exploring the interconnections between people, cultures and the natural environment grounded in the local. And I think it's really important to acknowledge here the importance of, tying back to how I started the presentation, learning about and engaging with your local Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, if you're listening from somewhere else in Australia, histories and cultures and knowledges. Because these local places really offer profound opportunities for deep learning and therefore increased engagement. And what can sometimes happen in schools, particularly if we're sort of required as teachers to use different specific resources or textbooks, is that learning becomes placeless. And I think there's no better way to increase engagement for children than to link the learning to their backyard, to their local environment. And Rex shared, you can grow food, you can make it beautiful, you can create habitat and make nice places to be. We sort of hammer away at those messages about what we can do at our place. And I really encourage you to think about, motivating children, whether they're your students or your own children, to think about how they can engage with their own places in a meaningful way. This is a story that really resonated for me, and this is from Eliana. She shared, I had previously taught endangered animals, and all the endangered animals that we'd ever researched had been polar bears and pandas, all the big names. And I wouldn't have even known about the orange-bellied parrot or the helmeted honeyeater and all of these amazing animals that are our animals and that don't live anywhere else. So how important is that? And I'd encourage you to reflect upon how many local native animals you or your children or your students can name, and think about during these times whether that might be an interesting focus for your learning to really learn about and connect with your local place. Experiential pedagogies involves hands-on experiences and meaningful reflection. And I think that meaningful reflection is crucial because often, hopefully we're doing these really fun and engaging things, but sometimes in the busyness of schooling, that reflection can sort of fall by the wayside. And Rex shared why that's so important. I think that young people need rich experiences in the outdoors. And then you come back and you sit down somewhere and you reflect on those experiences. So it's, we did this and what have we learned from doing that? I think if we can just find many different ways to make kids stop and think about what they're learning and why it is meaningful, then that's really good. And Rex shared that they constantly ask children to think about how they've shifted, their understanding has shifted or changed and what they're wondering now. So thinking about how what they've learned might apply in different settings, different places, different learning experiences. And these are just some examples of some experiential kind of pedagogies. Composting, gardening, cooking is another one. Just really getting out there and getting your hands dirty and learning along the way. And something that I guess underpins what I've been talking about this whole way through is that these opportunities to be active and get outdoors really boost children's mental, physical and emotional health, which therefore obviously has such a powerful impact on their resilience. Agency and participation is another sort of pedagogical approach which involves developing a sense of agency through active participation and really genuine decision-making opportunities. So this is an example in the photo you can see of the children sort of beyond the boundaries of the school, working with someone from Water Watch and doing a whole bunch of different water testing experiments. And knowing all of those children know that they enter the data into the system and that data is actually used by scientists. So it's encouraging us to think about ways that we can embed these opportunities for citizen science and real world learning experiences that will help children to feel like they can actually take action and make a difference. Because opportunities for children to take action and enact meaningful change increases their confidence, their belief in their ability to make a difference, and therefore their resilience. I love this example. This is at one of the schools I visited. They had, I think it was 17 worm farms, and the teacher put it to them and said, what are we going to do with all this worm juice? And so once a week, all of the kids, 2 classes, they have a bit of a roster. They bottle up all the worm juice, they label it, and one afternoon a week, grandparents and parents and friends come in and buy the worm juice. Obviously, that's a little bit difficult at this time, but it's definitely something that, that could happen at home, and, leave your worm juice at the letterbox and someone can come and pick it up. So it's just thinking about ways that we can, as I said, sort of encourage children to take action in really diverse ways to increase their kind of sense of agency. Another school had a green dream team, so children who are interested in the environment, and they brainstormed at the start of the year what they'd really like to do, and gardening was a big focus. They also wanted to watch environmental movies to learn, but they wanted to make environmental movies too. Stories and storytelling was a very strong feature in a lot of the teachers' practices, and Rex shared that storytelling is the thread that ties things together, and he shared he's always on the lookout for interesting stories to share with the children. And the best way to get young people thinking about nature is to provide them with heaps of interesting stories about the living things around them. And Rex emphasised that there's a really big difference between banging away about facts and telling stories. And I think sometimes we can kind of just expect to send our kids or our students outside and that they'll, be distracted and amazed by all the wonders of nature. But I think we really need to model that enthusiasm and that engagement and sense of wonder, and storytelling can be a really powerful way to develop that interest and that sense of wonder. Inquiry-based learning is another approach, and Eliana shared that is at the heart of any environmental education, or it really should be, particularly around releasing power and giving children the opportunities to do the hard thinking rather than just saying, this is what you need to know. We've decided that this is most important. And the phases of the inquiry process are tuning into students' thinking, finding out, sorting out, going further, synthesising and reflecting, acting and applying. And I'd encourage everyone to access the resources from Kath Murdoch's website. She's a real guru in inquiry learning, and I think particularly for children that are at home or teachers that are planning online experiences, developing an inquiry project and inquiry exploration is perfect for these times. But I think it's really important that you recognise your role to kind of set some parameters and help children keep on track and support them to find opportunities to problem find, problem solve, and have success at the end too. That's really crucial. I'll just share 1 or 2 quick examples of arts-based, and this was one of the educators asked the children to create a map of the walk in dirt using natural materials, and then asked them to tell a story from the walk, and Audrey recorded that. And these are just some amazing arts-based sculptures that everyone in the school did together. So it was multi-stage groups, and it was beautiful what they created. Now, I'm nearly out of time, but I just wanted to share some resources with you for you to potentially access to support your planning of environmental education in these times. And I just really wanted to reiterate that, the outdoors is such a rich context for learning, and, encouraging kids to get outside and into their backyards is really important. So obviously, children's books or older books are really important. Just Google 10 best environmental books and lots of options will come up. Really encourage you to engage with the history and the culture of your local area. I found this amazing podcast. It's called Catastrophe or Transformation, and it's for children and young people, and it explores, climate change, grief, eco-anxiety. I haven't listened to that yet. I just discovered it yesterday, but I'm really looking forward to that. Encourage you to look out for things like this. This was happened yesterday, a Facebook Live to meet Aussie sharks and rays. Cool Australia is an amazing website with an abundance of resources and lesson plans and unit guides. Getting started with sustainability in schools is a great resource portal, and it has things like this: how to build a worm farm, our land, our stories. There's more teacher resources on lots of different websites. And there's also lots of different environmental days that can be a real inspiration when you're sort of thinking about planning learning experiences. This is a project that one of my PhD supervisors worked with her team and a wonderful group of children and young people, and I really encourage everyone to access this survey. This is a survey to help you identify your climate change personality, and this project also with children and young people developed 2 curriculums, and this is an amazing example of the collective inquiry process, and you can find these curriculums on the Climate Change and Me website, so I really encourage you to check those out. And I definitely would recommend taking a look at the cross-curriculum priorities, the sustainability cross-curriculum priority, but also the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures CCP, because they have some great ideas and guidance and inspiration to help inform your approaches. This article is great for the early childcare setting. This is from a colleague, Wendy Boyd, and one of her colleagues around exploring these sorts of concepts in the early childhood setting. And I wanted to just reiterate that we're trying to move beyond this egotistical worldview where humans are at the centre to an ecotistical worldview where we're developing an understanding and a real conscious awareness of our interconnectedness, because this, as I mentioned earlier, has such a big impact on how accountable we feel, the behaviours that we choose to engage in, and therefore then how resilient we feel. Because a conscious awareness of our interconnectedness is really crucial to inspiring different, nourishing, positive ways of living, being and doing, and therefore building resilience. So just my final tips: focus on that interconnectedness and developing a sense of place. Take an interdisciplinary approach. Find your community, probably online at this stage. Involve children in the planning and decision making, and draw upon the cross-curriculum priorities for inspiration. And this is final words from one of my pilot study participants. Don't get overcome by the enormity of it and the disastrous direction we're headed. Just work out what you can do and what you can empower your kids to do. Thank you very much.